Hi, Les Jerome again. And before I get into anything about Wallia's Quest, I wanted to make a shameless plug for The Last Commando. The reason why is I heard yesterday that Secretary of Defense Hegseth is calling all of the generals, admirals, and their sergeants major, senior enlisted advisors to Quantico for a big meeting, and they have no idea what the agenda is. And it's swirling around on my West Point class, email discussion board right now about are they going to have to swear an oath of loyalty to Trump or some such thing. I have no idea what's going on. I would tell you though, in The Last Commando, one of the things that I did is I examined how someone could take control of the United States government as an autocrat. And the point of no return is the Posse Comitatus Act, which was enacted after the Civil War to prevent the military from being able to do law enforcement functions. If that goes away and military force is able to be used to enforce the law, you're at the point of no return. The other thing I wanted to make as an editorial comment this morning is I watched Army last night get beaten pretty badly by Eastern Carolina University. And the service academies are the only real institutions that are doing college football like college football used to be played. You look at a team photo of the Army football team from year to year, you can actually recognize the players. In this era of NIL and the transfer portal, that doesn't happen anymore. I mean, basically players go from one school to another, and the team that you have on the field are just the paid professionals that are paid to represent that university on the football field. I mean, I've heard it said that when quarterbacks get drafted into the NFL, they take a pay cut because they're being paid so much through NIL. So enough for that. Now back to Wallia's Quest. A Goth fight for freedom in a Roman world. My wife's cousin asked me yesterday after seeing the last video, okay, so big deal. I mean, what's the big deal about the Goth migration? So what? You had a bunch of barbarians come across the border. And I had to think about that for a bit, and I came up with a thought experiment. So I'm going to ask you to bear with me and imagine the following scenario. Imagine that the drug lords have taken over Baja California. The states of Baja California Norte and Baja California Sur ask the U.S. government to provide sanctuary for their people. The president allows the people of Baja California Norte in, but tells the people of Baja California Sur that they can't. His idea is to exploit the people for cheap agricultural labor and to fill the ranks of the military because recruiting is always difficult. And so that reduces the size of the crossing. So the entire population of Baja California Norte, Tijuana, Mexicali, everything in that whole state crosses the border, men, women, and children. They bring the state government with them and their armed forces with them as well. So their police forces, everything goes. The Department of Homeland Security does what it can to manage the crossing, but they're overwhelmed. The U.S. government at that point realizes that they bought off more than they can chew, so the Department of Homeland Security tries to regain control of the situation. But that fails miserably. The people the Baja California Norte feel like they've been ill-treated. And so what they do is they rebel and they take over all of Southern California. The president then federalizes the National Guard to restore order. A series of battles occurs between the National Guard and the military forces of Baja California Norte. The Baja California Norte people defeat each one. And then seeing this, all the people from Baja California Sur say, hey, way is clear, they come in too. And so you now have a much bigger group there. And so now the president's got a really bad situation, so he calls on the U.S. military to defeat the people from Baja California and Baja California Sur, which I think now we'll just call it Californios just to make it simpler. So he calls the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines to drive these people back to Mexico. The situation is so critical that the president personally accompanies this expedition to drive these people back. A big battle occurs near Los Angeles. The entire United States military is destroyed on the battlefield and the president's killed. The Californios, I was calling that now, they basically now rampage freely through the entire southwest United States. The undermanned U.S. military can't defeat the invaders, but the Californios can't occupy the whole country either, because everybody in the United States obviously has their own personal arsenal of weaponry. And so the new president eventually, after a time, comes to an agreement with the Californios. The U.S. gives the Californios the state of Arizona as their new homeland, and requires them to provide recruits for the U.S. military and their entire army to help defend the United States if the president deems it's necessary, if we get attacked by Mexico or Canada. Meanwhile, giving Arizona to the Californios causes a political firestorm in the United States. The next presidential election is disputed, and the loser won't concede. A civil war ensues in the United States. The losing presidential candidate, who advocated driving the Californios back to Mexico, raises an army to defeat the legitimate president and drive him from office, and to defeat the Californios. The legitimate president calls on the Californios, who are here and that he settled in Arizona, to help him defeat his political opponent. Another big battle happens. In this battle, the quote-unquote legitimate president defeats and kills his opponent, but the Californios absorb nearly all of the casualties in the process. They believe that the legitimate president in that battle had two objectives. The first was to defeat and kill his rival, and the second one was to weaken them. So they rebel again. For the next 15 years, the Californios basically rampage throughout the southern United States, trying to reach a satisfactory agreement with the U.S. government that gives them a permanent homeland within the boundaries of the United States and prevents them from being exploited again. To make matters worse, the Canadians are watching all this, and they decide this would be a great time to invade the United States. After all, it's a lot warmer in the United States in wintertime than it is in Canada, right? Eventually, they control the Pacific Northwest, Idaho, Montana, North, South Dakota, Washington, and Oregon. And faced with an invasion from Canada and wandering Californios, the U.S. government's totally powerless. But the Californios depend to try to leverage the situation to force the U.S. government to come up with an agreement to get what they want. But the president won't budge. In response, the Californios keep moving from the southern U.S. and rampage up the east coast of the United States. Still, the president won't negotiate. Finally, in frustration, the Californios capture Washington, D.C., and sack the city. Still, the president won't come to an agreement. Finally, the president selects a competent general to lead the U.S. military. He uses the Californios to drive the Canadians back to Canada. And based on this success, he gives the Californios Iowa, Nebraska as their new homeland, a central position in the United States from where they can be used by the U.S. government to maintain order in the homeland and to repel future invasions from Mexico and Canada. That really sounds pretty dystopian, doesn't it? I mean, it sounds just fantasy. If you change the players, make the United States into the Roman Empire, the president into the Roman emperor, the losing presidential candidate into usurpers, the Californios into the Goths, the Canadians into the Vandals, Alans, and Sueves, and Washington, D.C. into Rome, you have a pretty accurate, if somewhat simplified, description of the 40-year Goth migration. This event was probably as disturbing to the Romans as that dystopian scenario I described would be to us. I'm sure it totally shattered their world. In fact, I know that it shattered it so much that St. Augustine wrote City of God to refute the pagans who blamed Christianity for the sack of Rome. And so it was a big deal. But instead of telling that story from the well-trodden Roman perspective in Wallia's quest, I decided to make my protagonist a Goth. His name was, of course, Wallia. We know nothing about him until he became king toward the end of the migration. This allowed me to have Wallia tell his story in his own words about the entire 40-year migration and the experiences he had along the way. As a spoiler, Wallia, because we know nothing about him before, is a pretty interesting guy, and he's able to seamlessly move between the Goth and Roman worlds, which actually happened a lot in those days. Along the way, he has numerous adventures and gains the skills basically to work with his adversaries and eventually to give his people, by working with the Romans, home and freedom from Rome. And but he didn't get Nebraska and Iowa, but Aquitaine and Gaul was pretty close. So that's basically the book in a nutshell. And thanks for listening. And go Army. Hope next time we actually win. Bye.